All right, and it's time for another episode of the podcast. Today we are in a house in Memphis, as opposed to the farmer's market, so it should be nice and quiet here. And today my guest is,
Somerset O'Neil.
and we're going to be talking burlesque dancing today. So, unfortunately, it's not a video podcast for you guys out there, but maybe one day we'll have the equipment for it. So, first of all, what is burlesque dancing for anybody that doesn't know?
Burlesque dancing is, let's see, it's like a body positive form of stripping. A lot of people are in it because they like to wear sparkly clothes and dance around naked on stage, and
Those are the burlesque or the strippers?
both.
Both.
Both, and actually some burlesque performers are professional strippers, so there is a lot of overlap there, but burlesque tends to be a little bit more on the artsy side, whereas stripping is kind of heavy on the paying close attention and being personal with the audience, whereas a burlesque performer is more telling a story to the audience and doesn't really have too much physical interaction with the audience most of the time.
Right. And from the shows that I've been to, it seems like the focus is really more on the costuming and the actual, I guess, the story of each dance is kind of its own little story.
Yes, it's kind of focused on the element of the tease, which, I mean, everybody knows when they go to a burlesque show that they're going to get to see boobies at some point. So the anticipation is in the payoff, but it's in the clever and colorful removal of costume pieces on the way to the reveal that is supposed to be the entertaining part and not so much the payoff at the end. And if you will look over this way, not that the listeners can see, but
There are tons of plastic bins full of beads
that is
costuming.
all my burlesque stuff. Like, I've got a giant pair of fans up there. I have 2 bins full of just crafting and colorful crap that I add to things to make them look sparkly when I perform. But yes, my collection has become quite huge over the years, and I'm running out of room.
How did you first get involved?
Well, I had a mutual friend that was a performer with the Memphis Bells, and she invited me to a show, which just happened to be around my birthday about 6 years ago. So that's kind of how I dipped my toe in the scene. Was I started going to shows, and then I became a stage maid, and then eventually I became a performer.
So what does the stage maid entail?
Oh, there's all kinds of fun names for panty wranglers, like kittens, and they do colorful things like pick up. They don't just pick up panties, but they set props up, and they're kind of stage hands, but, we like them to look cute and bend over and show their butts and keep the audience engaged while the scene is changing over for the next performer.
Okay. So how long did you do that?
I'm trying to remember. I think I was like a stage kitten for a couple of years before I actually started performing.
How did you make the jump?
Let's see here. My first show was actually in Little Rock with the Diamond Dames, and I had been talking to them for a little while before I started performing with them. So they kind of gave me like my first opportunity, and I still didn't go all the way my first time. I did some striptease, but like I didn't take my top off or show my butt or anything like that. So it's a little nerve-wracking for some people for their first time, because they're like, okay, I'm going to do this, and they jump out there, and then they're like, there's 100 people staring at me.
Right.
So that definitely was, a good way for me to get my feet wet. I did something funny, like I did like an Egyptian themed act, and I put giant eyes of Horus on my boobs. So when I did my reveal, like there were big golden boobs and eyes like staring at the audience, so they knew to laugh because it was supposed to be funny.
Right.
Even though my entire act leading up to that point was like serious and like costumes and stuff flowing everywhere, and then at the end it was like, hey, my boobs and eyes are right here.
Right.
So I think, introducing a little bit of a comedic element there at the end kind of helped me to get over my nerves.
It seems like burlesque, there is that sort of element to it. Anyway, it's sort of like a vaudeville meets stripping kind of thing, I guess.
Yes, there are like so many different ways that it can be interpreted from different people, but a lot of it is, like storytelling, or there's, like a funny gimmick to kind of like hook people into going, oh, I haven't seen that before. Because, if you've been to 100 burlesque shows, you've seen 100 girls take their clothes off, but,
right.
Maybe only 50 of them do something that's completely unique and different from everybody else. Not to say that everybody's a cookie cutter and does the same thing, but it just kind of helps to break up the show a little bit, so that, you're not always going, everything's so serious, I'm just supposed to, like, sit here and wait for the boobs. No,
right.
It's cool to, like, laugh, it's cool to, catcall and get into the story if the performer's telling a story other than just taking your clothes off.
Yeah, how do you, for each show that you do you set up a new act, or do you recycle, or how does that work?
It depends on if the show is a themed show or if it's just like an anything goes show. Because with a themed show, you definitely have to like set things up ahead of time. Like a couple years ago, we did a kinky geeky show in Little Rock that was supposed to be like movies and video game and comic book themed, and I did an act with a character from Final Fantasy X. And it took me 3 months to get that thing ready.
Oh, wow.
Because a lot of it was costuming. Like, I really wanted the costume to look authentic to the character. And I got so focused on costuming, I was like, what the hell am I going to do with her in my act? Like, I don't just want to, like, go up there and do my thing and have everybody automatically know that I'm a video game character, because not everybody plays Final Fantasy.
Right.
So I did kind of have to tell a story. Like I have a little stuffed Moogle that I came out with, so maybe people would recognize, without being told by the MC, that that's who I was supposed to be.
Right.
That was a lot of fun, though. That was probably one of my favorite acts that I've ever done. And I've actually done it a couple of times, both in themed shows and in just anything goes shows.
And what's the process like for getting together a costume for one of these things?
It can vary. Like, I don't have a sewing machine, so I don't really fabricate a lot of my costume pieces. Mm-hmm. But my Final Fantasy costume, I bought a few pieces and added to them. And, like, I actually used a pair of pillowcases to make sleeves out of.
Oh, wow.
So, that is kind of an interesting process, like trying to figure out how you can repurpose things so you don't have to go buy a sewing machine and actually sew all the stuff yourself. Because buying the costume pieces themselves can be outrageously expensive.
Right.
So, yeah, that's a lot of what I do is, like, I buy pre-made costumes, but I also fabricate out of stuff that I already have.
And are you kind of responsible for your own costuming and all of that, or is there other people that help out?
For the most part, yeah, you pretty much are responsible for all your own costume pieces. I mean, sometimes, like, crap happens where you're at a show and, oh my god, I don't have any fake eyelashes, or I forgot my gloves, or, a lot of times stuff like that happens and girls will help each other out and they'll swap costume pieces out. But for the most part, like, something that has 3,000 rhinestones on it probably isn't going to get lent out to somebody.
Right.
Ladies also happen to be very particular about their feather fans. They, they're usually real supportive of everybody, being enthusiastic, especially with new performers. But when a new performer is like, I need help and I don't have anything, can I borrow your $500 feather fan so I can do a fan act?
Right.
It doesn't happen often, and if it does, it's usually because there's a lot of trust there.
Right.
Like, I actually had somebody let me borrow her fan so I could do a photo shoot, and, I was kind of touched because I know how important this stuff is to performers, and that she let me use them, until the next time I saw her was really awesome, because it, helped me come out with some really great, some really great photos.
What's the process like for as a new person getting into it?
Usually somebody will come to like their first burlesque show and just be amazed and blown away and be like, oh my god, I have to do this. And I was really excited and enthusiastic in the same way when I went to my first burlesque show. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so much fun. And, you know, growing up, I've always been into, like, costuming and stuff like that. So, I just kind of, like, started going to shows and started getting to know the people that were in the scene. Plus, it kind of helped that, you know, I had some people that I already knew that were performers. But, I mean, some girls, when they start out, like, they don't really know anybody. It's just somebody was like, hey, let's go to a burlesque show, and they're like, I want to do this, but I don't know anybody. So, yeah, you have to go to shows, you have to kind of start getting to know the performers that are already on the scene, because a lot of them are really helpful and totally willing to get you started. Some people aren't, but, you know, some people just want the spotlight to focus solely on them, and they don't want new people around. Like,
right.
You know, and I'm not, like, naming anybody specific. I'm just saying that, you know, some people have a different attitude towards new people starting out. There was one girl that I helped out quite extensively when she first got started, and I probably won't go out of my way like that quite as much again to help another newbie out. But I'm totally all about, if somebody wants to get started, you know, helping them, you know, meet people and figure out what they want to do, what kind of character they want to create, you know, that kind of thing. Because it is kind of important to know, like, you know, do you just want to be a stage kitten, or do you actually want to create a character?
Right. How is, like, burlesque seemed to have kind of blown up in Memphis, like, over the past few years. What's that like, and what is it like now?
Compared to a couple of years ago, the scene has died down quite a bit because one of the troupes that was producing a good deal of the shows and that was putting on the Memphis burlesque showcases, they are no longer performing or producing shows. So I really think that they were kind of like the backbone of the community, and a lot of people built, I don't want to say they built their acts around that, but they kind of, imitation isn't always the most sincerest form of flattery. Like, if somebody's doing in burlesque in Memphis, it's not always cool to be like, hey, I want to do that too, and then do the exact same thing that somebody else is doing.
Right.
So, since the scene has changed quite a bit lately, there aren't as many shows that involve different people. Like, you know, there's a monthly show that goes on that pretty much, you know, has the same couple of people every month. And then there's a new group, the Mahogany Cover Girls. They've just gotten started, and I think they've only done a couple of shows. I have not been to see any of their shows just yet. But the Memphis burlesque scene is definitely not what it was, say, 3 or 4 years ago. It's changed quite a bit.
Where is there a scene now? You mentioned Little Rock earlier.
Little Rock, actually, their scene has changed a little bit too. They're not quite as active as they were a couple years ago either, but they do have a new troupe. I believe they're called Blood and Rhinestones. And what I would say is, probably for the Mid-South area, I would say that Nashville is the most active as far as all that goes, because they have regular shows, and they not only have regular shows, they have girls that have been doing it for a really long time. So they bring in touring guest performers frequently. They have a Nashville School of Burlesque where they train people. They have their touring performers do workshops, and that's actually a really good place to go to learn right now. Because, you know, like I said, there's not really a lot of that going on in Memphis right now. There aren't too many, you know, workshops where, you know, you can just be like, hey, 10 people want to learn how to strip. That's not discounting, like, the pole dance classes that have been going on here. That is something that is going on in Memphis. But Nashville,
it's a different sort of
yeah.
What all is involved? Like, when you go to school, what kinds of things are you learning? Like, what?
There are all kinds of stuff. There is costuming classes where, you know, you can actually learn how to put stuff together with and without a sewing machine. You can learn how to make pasties. You can learn how to make headpieces. You can learn ways to embellish your outfits that don't cost an arm and a leg, because a lot, performers that have been established for a really long time, they can spend a crap load of money on Swarovski crystals for their stuff. I think I lost my train of thought.
So you're learning the costume, or
yeah.
you're learning how to like...
Yeah, the workshops. They will do, man, they've got like twerking shops, they've got like fitness, and they've got a lot, they've got it going on there, they really do. I mean, it's not just learn how to do burlesque, it's a little bit of keeping in shape while you're learning how to do burlesque. Not saying that you can't be overweight and do burlesque, but like, if you have health problems or back problems like I do, like you kind of have to find ways around, obviously like I can't twerk with, my back being screwed up, so I kind of have to not do that.
Right.
But, let's see, there are also classes where they'll teach you a choreography, so that you can get on stage and have an act and not have to sit there and come up with something all by yourself.
When you have to come up, like, what is your process like when you come up with your act, as far as how you're going to move and all that?
I rely heavily on cues from my music and props, because if I actually tried to like memorize an entire routine, like step by step and foot for foot, it kind of doesn't, to me personally, I don't think it allows for wardrobe malfunctions or any other kind of mishap that might happen on stage. Like, I've had my glittery shoes get stuck to my skirt, and the time I took to remove my shoes from my feet and get them untangled from my skirt, like, I was already supposed to be taking off another piece of clothing at that point.
Right.
And I pretty much ended up kicking my shoe across the stage and like just yanking my skirt off, because I was getting upset and I didn't want the audience to see that. I mean, obviously they knew that I was struggling with a costume piece, but I didn't want to have like the oh shit look on my face.
Yeah.
So that's part of the reason why, like, I leave room for things to happen, because I have one act that is an Isis Wings routine that I've performed in front of an audience at least half a dozen times. I think I've only done it once where I've not had a wardrobe or a music malfunction.
Wow.
So yeah, I try to stay fluid by not being too rigid with when I'm going to do my moves and where I'm supposed to be when I'm doing them.
When with the music, I've seen burlesque shows where it was live music. I've seen pre-recorded, discs or MP3s or something. What type of musics do you use? And
I use stuff that's already been recorded. It's totally possible to do to perform burlesque to live music, but usually those girls have heard the music before.
Right.
When you start to freestyle with live music, then you kind of start getting into to what the girls at the strip club do, because they're kind of freestyling to whatever's being played at the moment. They don't really have like, they're not going to be on one side of the stage when the chorus plays and
right.
that kind of stuff. So sometimes it just depends. Like, I'll hear a song and be like, oh my god, I have to do an act to that, or I'll already have a concept in mind and then I'll go find the music. Like, I think the other night I sat on Spotify and I listened to like 15 different covers of I'm Going Down.
Yeah.
Yes, they all sounded the same, but like one of them sounded different from the other ones that I liked that one better.
Yeah.
It spoke to me for whatever reason.
Yeah, you were talking about having costume mishaps and that kind of thing. What, like, share some stories that have happened, like what?
Well, yeah, there was the time when I had to kick my shoe across the stage. And part of the reason why I was having a problem with that act was because we were sharing the club with drag queens that night. It was a show in Little Rock on a weeknight, and I did not realize that there was like a blower fan on stage, because they use that for effect, because
right.
It blows their hair back and it's real dramatic when they're doing their performances. Well, I didn't realize the blower fan was on stage. And so I'm up there and I'm trying to do all these spins and twirls with these skirts, and then I had the shoe mishap. My glittery shoe getting caught in my skirt because my skirt was blowing around. So I had to kick that across the stage. And Isis Wings, if you spread them out and there is wind blowing, they don't do what you're expecting them to do. So my wings were blowing in my face. Yeah, and like every time I tried to get them out of my face, they were like getting tangled up in my costume. And like when I walked off stage, I did not handle this gracefully at all. When I walked off stage, I went backstage and I said, I wish I had known, somebody had told me, I said, I wish I'd known there was a fucking fan on stage. Or I wish somebody had told me there was a fucking fan on stage. And I yelled it so loudly that everybody in the audience heard it.
Oh, wow.
Not my finest moment.
Yeah.
I mean, like, and I apologized afterwards because I realized what I did and how ungraceful it was and how horrible it was. And I was like, this is not cool. These drag queens probably are never going to want to share a stage with me again.
Speaking of audience, what are the audiences like that go to burlesque shows?
It's usually a pretty good mix of folks that have been to shows and folks that have not been to shows. So the folks that have been to shows, they know what to expect. They know how to react. They know how to kind of when to respond. You know, because if you clap or wolf whistle or cheer, like when a key piece comes off or when she does a really sexy dance move, you know, that is encouraging. But sometimes new people, they're just kind of frozen because they're just like, so like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then, there's always people that don't like it. So they don't say anything or do anything either. I mean, people have gotten up and left in the middle of shows before because they either didn't care for what was going on or they did not expect to see what was going on. So usually, though, the audiences are always really warm and receptive. I mean, it's always a good mix of girls and guys. So,
do you ever run into any resistance with burlesque at all? Is there any from anywhere?
This is kind of interesting because around this time last year, I was supposed to do a show in Jonesboro, and I went to school at ASU for a while, so I lived in Jonesboro for a couple of years, and we had like posters made up. It was my first headlining show. I was the only burlesque performer on the show, and they had talked it up. Like, they were on the news. My picture was on K8. Like, it was like blowing up. There was at least 200 or 300 people that were expecting to go to the show, and the venue was getting concerned because they were like, we only have enough room to seat 50 people. And there were some other issues where, like, they were trying to get fire performers, and they wanted to shut the street down in front of the venue so that people could stand outside and watch the fire performances. And the day before the show, they were like, we still don't have the permit to shut the street down, so they went to go check on it, and, like, City Hall said they'd never received an application, so they started getting kind of freaked out, and they canceled the show less than 24 hours before I was supposed to perform.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, and so it was kind of like all my friends were like outrageously disappointed because most of them had never seen a burlesque show, and B, had never seen me perform. So they were really pretty disappointed about that. But I just really think that the venue got cold feet.
Right.
And they were afraid that the cops were going to show up and everybody was going to get arrested and go to jail. And I was like, I'm the one taking my clothes off. Like, I would be the one getting arrested. You know, I don't see what the big deal is, but
what are are there any legal implications for burlesque? Because, there are, on the books here especially, there are really strict laws about that sort of thing, which mostly get bought off and ignored, but... Mostly,
my understanding is that there is a set of laws for stripping that is for Tennessee, and that's like, your butt crack has to be covered a certain way, and your boobs have to be covered. It's supposed to be from the top of your nipple down, but a lot of places kind of get away with that by wearing what we call the underbra, which is a bra with the cups cut out. But my understanding is that different municipalities in Tennessee can make their own laws for nudity, and most of them are pretty much like no stripping where alcohol is served. So that's why Memphis is having issues with their clubs, because their strippers can no longer strip, and in Jonesboro, it was kind of like there was this gray area where, you know, I had asked before we had booked the show, you know, what are the laws in Jonesboro on stripping, because I really don't show my butt off anyway, so I don't really have any issues with, you know, getting in trouble for my butt cheek showing.
Right.
And a lot of the pasties that I wear are elaborate, so they'll have like feathers or something, you know, that really just covers up most of my boob. So I really, in Jonesboro, I really was not going to be stripping that much. I mean, I was going to be taking off 6 or 7 articles of clothing, but I was not going to be naked, and I wasn't even going to be mostly naked. So they were kind of like, well, we talked to a lawyer, but we're kind of still unclear on... And I was just like, look, I really don't take that much off. I really don't think this is going to be an issue. We're not serving alcohol. Heck, you know, they weren't even really serving food. They were just going to have, like, snacks and stuff and serve coffee. So... as far as that went, I was like, I'm pretty sure that this isn't going to be an issue because it's not a liquor serving establishment, and I'm really not stripping. I'm not going to be naked or half naked or mostly naked. So it was just kind of weird that it was like, well, you know, we could get in trouble, but, you know, we might not. And I'm just okay.
Well, you know, a few years ago, the laws really got tightened down here in Memphis. And did that put kind of a kibosh on the...
no, actually, I think it, like, made burlesque more popular.
Okay.
Because I don't think we really saw a whole lot of crossover from strip clubs, though, because people that go to strip clubs really don't go to burlesque shows.
Right.
Like, they're going to the strip club to get something.
Sure.
Like, they want personal attention paid to them by a naked woman. People usually go to burlesque shows for more of a community feeling, and to see boobs. But I really think that it got more popular after our strip clubs got squashed. Okay.
So those laws didn't have any, like, really impact on your actual performers and what they could do? Or...
Not really. I mean, when there were shows going on at the High Tone all the time, we had cops coming in the club, like, while the shows were going on. And I really don't know why they were in there. I mean, they were probably just trying to make sure that, you know, we weren't doing drugs or selling ourselves.
Right.
Because, like, you know, one of the differences is that we're not supposed to be interacting with the audience at all. Like, we're not supposed to be letting them touch us. We're not supposed to be touching them. We're not supposed to be, like, doing a playful back and forth with props. Like, there's not supposed to be any interaction between us and the audience at all. So I think that kind of helps to not have unwanted attention on us.
Right. So what's next for you? When's your next show? Or what's going on with you in the future?
Well, I've actually been on a medical hiatus because I had elbow surgery earlier this year. So what I've been doing in my downtime is I had a photo shoot. I actually had a few costume pieces custom made. I bought a pair of feather fans that are really, really nice. I went to the Anime Blues Con convention a couple of weeks ago, and I did not realize that they have a cosplay stripping contest and a strip show. So I think I'd really kind of like to dip my toe in that a little bit. I mean, it won't be until next year again when Anime Blues Con comes back around, but I think it would be really cool to do my Final Fantasy act.
Yeah.
I mean, even if I don't win, because obviously, you know, I have more experience than some of the people that have never been on stage before. But it would just mostly be to have a lot of fun.
Yeah. So if people are interested in what you're doing and where you'll be at and performing and shooting and all that kind of stuff, where can they go to?
I have a fan page and a friend page on Facebook under Somerset O'Neil. And that's the best way to find me.
Awesome. And thank you very much for, you know, talking. And, you know, a lot of people out there hope to see a lot of you, I guess, at one of your shows.
Cool.
And,
I hope so, too.
And if you want to know anything about what I'm doing, I keep my clothes on all the time. So sorry, guys and girls and whatever. But you can go to richardalester.com.